Galatians. I know we've already covered this passage that I had put in the bulletin, but I wanted to use that as a jumping off place for today. It's the first day of the new year. You're here today. You've got perfect attendance in 2023. I remember when I was a kid, even into my adulthood, I used to delight in reading the comic strips in the newspaper. Do they still put comic strips in the newspaper? I haven't looked at a newspaper in a long time. But we always called them the funny papers. There was a whole bunch of things. Some of them were serious. Some of them were sort of dramas that continued on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis until the storyline ended and they started with something new. Some of them were just silly, day-to-day. I know there's a lot of Peanuts characters still out that was a comic strip in the newspaper, and I remember there was one called Pogo. He had some neat things to say every once in a while. He's the one that I credit, and I think people give the credit to, of saying, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And that's pretty sound advice for all phases of our lives. I remember Little Abner. You remember Little Abner? Does anybody remember Little Abner but me? Little Abner and Daisy Mae. Daisy Mae caught Little Abner on Sadie Hawkins Day, and the Sadie Hawkins Day race, and they had a Sadie Hawkins Day race every year, and on that day the women got to chase the men, and if they caught the man they could propose marriage to him on that one day of the year. And I can remember when I was just a kid and not even old enough to think about participating in anything like that they would have a Sadie Hawkins Day race in town in Bristol where I grew up, and it was a big celebration thing. But the thing that I remember every year, it was the same cartoon every year except the dates were changed. Little Abner cartoon would have an old man with a long beard just hobbling along on a crutch going out the end of the cartoon, and coming in on the other end was a newborn child, a baby, and they had these banners across them, and the one going out was the year that had just ended, and the one coming in was the new year that was beginning. It was celebrating a new year beginning. For whatever reasons, we like the idea that a new year is an opportunity to start over. We've got 12 whole months now that are unblemished, lying ahead of us as far as we know. It's an opportunity to start over. And we can look back over the past 12 months and we can see some pleasant things that are good. We can see some tragic things that have taken place in our lives. We see things that we'd like to forget, and we can see things that we'll never forget. All in the past. Because this is a new year, a new place to start. What's in front of us? We don't know. We make resolutions. Anybody make New Year's resolutions anymore? You've reached the point where you think, well, what's the use? 2 weeks from now, I won't even remember what that resolution was. Probably tomorrow I'll already break whatever it was that I was supposed to be trying to do. We make resolutions because we want to change something. It can be anything from losing weight to exercising more to getting more sleep or not getting as much sleep and doing more work. Whatever you have in mind. Look at this in the 4th chapter of Galatians. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not gods. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and miserable principles? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that somehow I have wasted my efforts on you. Now we've been in Galatians. We took the little Christmas break from Galatians, but we were in Galatians for several weeks. I don't even know exactly what date we started. We've only got a couple more chapters to go, and we'll be out of Galatians. But the whole purpose in Paul writing the letter to Galatia, to the Galatian churches, was that they had come out of the world. They had come out of Judaism. They had come out of paganism, those who were the Gentile Christians, into the grace of God, into the knowledge of the gospel of grace. And the Judaizers had come in to the churches and were encouraging them to go back to the ways of the law. They were saying, if you don't obey the law of Moses, then you really can't be a Christian. And they were falling for it. When I said that, it just popped into my mind. Have you seen this? Anybody seen this thing it's on Fox News, where they're having a what do they call those things? It's sort of like a movie about the life of Christ, and the people are saying, Jesus, if you don't change your teachings or something like that, we're going to have to invoke the law of Moses. And they've got the character playing Jesus, and he says, I am the law of Moses. I like that. I'd like to see the program of whatever it is that's in. And that has nothing to do with the sermon. That's a commercial. But here were these Christians who had come to know the gospel of grace, And the Jews, they were trying to get these Jewish Christians to go back and observe the law of Moses. And to the Gentiles, they were trying to tell them that you have to become obedient to the law of Moses. Paul is saying here, how is it that you're turning back to those weak and miserable principles? What is it that's making you want to go back to that from which you have come out? We've talked about this. 26th chapter, the book of Acts. Paul standing on trial before King Agrippa. And Paul tells King Agrippa about what took place on that Damascus road. That he saw this light that came down from heaven, and it was so bright that it blinded him. And out of that light there was a voice that said, Paul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, who are you, Lord? And the voice in the light said, I am Jesus whom you're persecuting. And he told him to get up and go into the city, and it would be told him there what he had to do. And Ananias was appointed and came to him and told him what he needed to do. Paul says, I was not disobedient. I was not disobedient to that heavenly vision. I don't know that it was New Year's, but Paul made a resolution. He resolved at that point in his life that he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to correct the mistaken ideas that he had regarding Christ in the beginning of his relationship to Christ. And we know from the Scriptures that Paul was faithful to that resolution, that he never looked back, but he went forward doing what he now knew that God wanted him to be doing. And the fact that here were these Galatian Christians, one point he says, who has bewitched you? And here he says, how is it that you're turning back to these weak and miserable principles? And the fact that they could go back, the fact that they could put behind them this gospel of grace and embrace again the laws and the paganism and the rituals was just not understandable to him. I've known people like that. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to tell you about a man that I knew. I won't tell you his name, because you probably in all your existence will never run into the man personally. His name was Charlie Combs. He was a member of a church where I preached in Tennessee. He was a very likable fellow. he may still be alive. I don't know. He was about my age. I played a little basketball with him. We had a little church league basketball program, and I played a little basketball with him. Wasn't near as good as he was, but he was a leader. He was a leader. While I was there at that church, he became one of the elders of the church. He was married. He had a wife. Her name was Louise. They had been literally had been childhood sweethearts. I mean, they used to talk about her riding on the back of his tricycle. That's how far back their relationship had gone. They had one child, special needs child, pretty dramatically hindered child with special needs. Both active workers in the church. I left that church. I was working at Appalachian Christian Village. It's changed names now, but it was sort of a retirement home for sponsored and built by the Christian Church, and everybody in there was senior citizen, and you had to be so old before they'd let you in. And they had a nursing wing, and it was pretty. It's still in existence. It's changed names now, but it's still a pretty prominent place in Johnson City, Tennessee. I was working there. Charlie was a postman, mailman. In Johnson City, they had door-to-door delivery. Sort of like a rural route, except they had to drive into the neighborhood and then they'd get out and they carried the mail in the pouch on their back and walk up and put the mail in your mailbox on your front porch. Door-to-door delivery, and that's what he did. He didn't always do that. He gave the former preacher that was there before me credit for him having that job in the post office. He said they were at the house and he was looking for a job and didn't have a job to do and was trying to figure out what he was going to do to support his family, and the preacher said, "Well, let's pray." And they prayed for Charlie to find a job, and he said before they quit praying, the phone rang, and it was the post office where he'd put an application in telling him to report to come to work. And so he credited the prayers of that preacher for his job coming through at that time. And he'd been there several years by the time I knew him. But the last time I saw him, he's delivering mail there to the Appalachian Christian Village, and he and Louise had separated, divorced. Charlie had left the church. We were talking, I talked to him just briefly while he was there delivering mail. He had to work and I had to work. And I said, "Well, Charlie, what about the Lord?" And he said, "Is there one?" That's how far his mind had fallen. If you had known Charlie when I first met him, I would have hated to get in a discussion with him about the history of the Christian church and the Restoration movement, because he could rattle off dates and names and meetings that they had in the early days of the history of the Christian church He knew it better than I knew it, and I'd been in classes studying it. How is it that you're turning back to those weak and miserable principles? Who has bewitched you? I don't know what happened between him and his wife. But my way of thinking is that that's the time that he needed to turn to the church. That's the time he needed the support of the church and fellow Christians to hold him up and strengthen him. And he turned his back on it. He sort of blamed it. And I don't think the separation was his doing. I think it was hers. But instead of finding the strength and the support and the encouragement that I know his brothers and sisters would have given him, how is it that you're turning back to those weak and miserable principles? We've reached the point where we don't even make New Year's resolutions. We've already covered that. Because we joke about, well, I made a New Year's resolution. Tomorrow I'll have to make a New Year's resolution again because I've already strayed away. We resolve that we're going to lose weight, or we're going to exercise regularly, or we're going to quit some habit or vice that we've had for years. What about, though? What if we really got serious and made some New Year's resolutions on this, the first day of the new year, and talked about, if we're not already, prayer and Bible reading, some part of every day? Make that a serious commitment for 2023, that there's going to be some part of our day, and we'll do this at the same time every day, to have prayer and Bible reading as a part of our lives. I sort of joked, you've got perfect attendance so far this year. How about if we make that a resolution, that as much as it is possible for me to do so, I'll be in church every Lord's Day? You know, that used to be important. They gave you little badges that you wore on your coat lapel for perfect attendance. I can't remember the boy's name, but we had dress-up day every once in a while in school, and this boy would come to school, and he had a string of these things down about that long. He had perfect attendance for how many ever years, and they just attached onto the bottom of the one right above it. Sort of like a military man with all the stripes and the ribbons on his uniform. How about if we would resolve, first day of the year, to make regular church attendance as much as it is possible for us to do so? What if we as a church would resolve to develop a robust and multi-age Sunday school program sometime during the year of 2023. Now that means some of us would have to go to work. It means all of us would have to go to work because we're just a handful. And we'd all have to become involved in setting aside an extra hour on Sunday to come and be a part of a Sunday school program. And some of us would have to become teachers because we need more than one Sunday school class for the age development. Multi-age, robust Sunday school program. Oh, it's not possible. We're just a handful of people. If that's the attitude, then we might as well just go ahead and close the doors now. What if we as individuals, now listen, what if we as individuals resolve in 2023 that every week we invite somebody to come to church with us on Sunday? Now you can invite the same person every week if you want to. You think by the time you invite them 52 times that they ought to be here by the end of the year. And I know you know people that don't go to church. What if we resolve as Christians, as individuals, that during this next year, every week, that's not asking a whole lot, one person in the week to invite somebody to come to church with you. Now, I only had 4. Prayer and Bible reading every day, regular church attendance, developing a Sunday school program, participating in a Sunday school program, inviting somebody to come to church with you. 4 resolutions. I've got one more. What if we resolve to keep our resolutions? I don't know what was going through Paul's mind. Must have broken his heart. Who has bewitched you? How is it that you're turning back to these weak and miserable principles? How is it that you're ignoring the work that we need to be doing as a church? How is it that we ignore the growth that we need to make as individual Christians? We were talking in Sunday school just a few minutes ago. Now this, I've finished my sermon. This is extra. We were talking about the condition of our world. There's things taking place in our world today, and I know you've heard people say this, that I just never thought that would take place in our world. We've got men and women that can't tell you which one they are. And try to convince you that they're not what they are. And they're teaching our little children that that's okay. The only, and we discussed this back there. I'm not, as Marion said, and as I think it was Amos that said, I'm not a prophet nor son of a prophet. He was a dresser of fig trees, sycamore trees. I'm not a prophet nor son of a prophet. But I only see two solutions. One, we have a tremendous revival, great awakening again, or the Lord comes. New Year's Day. We can resolve to be what He wants us to be, or we can ignore it and let it take its course. Let's pray. Father, you know the needs of this nation. You know the needs of this church. You know the needs of this community. You know our abilities. You know our inabilities. Help us to be what you want us to be, what you've made us capable of becoming. Help it not to be said of us that we've fallen by the wayside, strayed from the truth, that we've wandered off seeking our own way. Help us to walk your way. Help us to go in the direction that you would have us to go. Strengthen us. Make us capable of the task that's before us. To be the light, your light in this world of darkness. I pray in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.